Good morning Steven en goedenavond kijkers. Welkom bij de tweede Kwinta webinar met Steven Hekker. Dit keer over hoe je omgaat met transformatorische verandering. Steven verzorgt daarover een keynote en een workshop tijdens het VCK-congres op 29 november. De dag ervoor, op 28 november, komt Steven ook een masterclass geven over een ander onderwerp, namelijk over transformatorisch leiderschap. Tijdens of na de komende webinar van Steven kunnen jullie via de chatbox vragen stellen. Hij zal ze na afloop van zijn webinar beantwoorden. Steven, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good to be here with everyone, and I guess my task is to give a foreshadowing of my keynote address, as well as I want to address how the workshop, the keynote address, and the time in that afternoon, which I guess is a workshop on the keynote, will all differ. So let me first go through and I'll cover broadly what I'll cover in the keynote. Embracing transformational change, the addition of SQ, actually is a very loaded, it seems to be a soft title, but embracing is a big deal. And embracing, if transformational change is with us constantly now, we once saw it as episodic, once in a while, a tsunami of change that would come to our doorstep, and we'd have to be prepared and overcome change. In fact, we would talk about change that way. Did you get on top of the change, on top of the IT change, on top of the marketing change or the manufacturing change? Well, we don't see it that way any longer because it is much speeded up. It's not episodic. It's not an episode. It's continuous. And given that, then comes the opportunity to see it differently. And that is in terms of embracing. Well, embracing is easy to say. It's difficult to do. And that really speaks to the subtitle, the addition of SQ, or spiritual quotient. And I'll get into that during the keynote, and I'll foreshadow it today. So the thrust here is that embracing transformational change may be a good mantra. It may be something that rings as a slogan, but it's rather difficult to do the way we have set up our leadership structures and our own mindsets around leadership. Well, first of all, what is transformation? It's the marked change in nature of function of organizational systems, creating a discontinuous step function improvement in sought after areas. So this is not about disruption. This is about transformation as a result of possible external disruption. And the term is being used here in saying we produce transformational change. And we produce it in sought after areas that we want results to occur. Now, it's true that we may have a disruption such as, let's take it on a personal basis, loss of a child, God forbid, or a family unit. That is a disruption. The transformation then becomes what's at hand. How does a family transform with that loss to something different, hopefully more effective? But, how do you transform in areas that are needing? So we can see transformation in the past. We don't have a problem there. We can see it. This is William Jennings. The building is an 1885 building. Up to that point, most buildings pretty much were limited to 6 stories tall. William Jennings produced a building differently than just laying brick in a facade of brick. He built it on what's called a bird cage mentality. And the bird cage design basically had steel framework in which then you put a facade of brick against that. So the brick didn't have to carry the whole weight of the building. I say that because up to that point, buildings were limited in height. But that's not the only transformation that occurred. Right along with that, there had to be a transformation of how to get to tall buildings. So Elijah Otis from Otis Elevators, in 1852, he came up with what's called a safety elevator. It was primarily used in elevators in manufacturing to carry heavy loads, but they had no automatic way of stopping. And so Elijah Otis teamed up with William Jennings, although they didn't know it at the time, and produced an elevator that then could soar the height of even the Empire State Building. And we wouldn't have the Empire State Building unless we had both those inventors. So now we start seeing that transformational change is rarely a single inventor or single idea generator. It's usually a combination of ideas coming together. And I would say I was just got back from France. I was in Bordeaux for a couple of weeks, but went through Paris, and my wife and I went to the Eiffel Tower with the Tower Eiffel, I guess. And you may recognize that even Otis provided the elevators for the Eiffel Tower, which to the French, I guess, was kind of hurtful. But the idea of getting to a top of even a structure like this was a challenge, and that was open in 1889, and new types of elevators had been constructed. So as we now soar ahead into the heavens, and of course, Tour Eiffel held the record for 41 years as the highest man-made structure until the Chrysler Building came into New York City, followed a year later by the Empire State Building. These inventions join each other; they combine with each other. And there's an elevator for the Tower Eiffel. So as I said before, even the business world is recognizing, they've recognized that we're not in the same patterns that we saw in the post industrial revolution. That although things were speeding up in that period of time, and of course we saw great expansion from the 1850s, 1830s with the first industrial revolution into the 1850s, all the way up to the 1980s. There's been a number of things that have caused change to explode. That is no longer a linear model in terms of increasing; it's exponential. And I'll show that that's in the case of speed of communication, speed of transport, in terms of life expectancy, in terms of health, wealth. All those things are exponential now in our world. In the last certainly 50 years, but many would argue in the last 20 years, has really formed a different system. So we can see it in the present. If we saw it in the past, we can see transformational change in the present, from checkout counters to self-checkout to no checkout, just deliver it to you. These are all stories you should be aware of. Obviously, taxis. I took an Uber in Bordeaux, took an Uber in Paris, to self-driving cars, and from Kodak to Polaroid to digital cameras to phone cameras. Now, this is all interesting. You all know these stories. What I want to impress upon you is, as much as we can see it in the past and see it in the present, we're very poor at predicting it. So if you went out, as we have done, and asked people, where is the cell phone going, for instance, where will the cell phone be 10 years from now? What you'll receive is incremental changes to the cell phone. You won't have many, if at all, radical thinking about the cell phone. You may have an implant, which of course has already been done, in terms of to the hand or behind the ear, but you won't have something that people can really see that, boy, that's a Jules Verne's type of change. Why is that? We're just not equipped to do that. We do see an incremental change, and we appreciate transformational change, but it usually takes some different tools and approaches and mindsets actually to even entertain transformational change. Imagine if you went back in the 1990s and we had the pager. Those that were around during that period of time, where we had a telephone pager, something that would beep, and then you could go to a landline and call. The same thing would be clear there. If you'd ask people of the pager generation, where is this going? I bet very few would think they'd have the internet in their hand, virtual mapping everywhere, the ability to pay, not even carry a wallet, to have a currency, banking, credit card, all those things within a cell phone. I don't think you would have had many, if any, that would have seen the transformative change that the pager ushered in. They would not have made that as big as a leap. Well, that's a short one on transformation. We'll go further into it now, to the heart of it, the embracing. Dr. Marvin Washington and I, we've penned 3 books together. The latest came out this summer, and it was based upon a research project that we did with the University of Alberta, and we still continue this work with the University of Alberta. He's a dean at in the management school, leadership school, full professor, and he and I have known each other for 30 plus years, and this is the type of work we do. Well, we were interested in why people don't embrace transformational change. We know they're not good in predicting it, in foreseeing it, but why don't they embrace it when it comes about? We actually took 2 units of study. One was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police of Alberta, 4,000 members. Key challenge, changing nature of law enforcement. You can imagine that. And we trained 3 cohorts of 25 leaders each. That has now ballooned up to 5 cohorts. Likewise with Alberta Health Services, where we now have 6 cohorts, 6-year-long programs, 40 senior leaders each. We wanted to see if the approach to embracing change that we had noticed actually had efficacy, if it actually made a difference. And I'll cover that change. The bottom line is, with this study, we showed that the addition of spiritual quotient actually did have a breakthrough impact on these senior leaders. Well, what am I speaking to about that? IQ, if we consider IQ, EQ, and SQ, these are not new terms, at least the first ones to you. IQ was supposed to be the golden goose, that we could actually measure intelligence. Now, when we first started measuring IQ back in the 1920s, it's changed. The metric has changed, has gotten better as time has gone on. We still use that to some extent. But the IQ measures, if you consider reading, writing skills, quantitative reasoning, you can read the list. It's about becoming smart, the ability for people to gather information and take in information and synthesize information. So when you look back at leadership training in the certainly in the 50s, 60s, 70s on into the 80s, we found that leadership training primarily focused on IQ, teaching things such as strategic planning, teaching such things as financial acumen, teaching aspects about how to organize manufacturing or how to organize a accountable information system or communication system. All those are important, but it was the functioning of an organization by a leader, be it military or church or manufacturing, that IQ was interested in promoting. And we basically did a good job. We produced good people coming ready for work with understanding those systems. Well, all of you have lived through now the revolution of EQ, and EQ really was 1980s. Goldman's book, Emotional Intelligence, spoke to the emotional quotient, a way of measuring emotional intelligence. Started looking at, leadership has a lot to do with teaming and the ability of leaders to connect with followers and other leaders. And so we saw that there was a growth in effectiveness of leaders that were trained or at least asked questions in the area of EQ. And you can see the list there. relationship management, empathy, self-regulation, so that leaders were seen to be needed to be related to other human beings, because this is a human endeavor, organizations are. Well, we're so smart, except we left out a key aspect, and the last aspect, in part because transformation is happening at such a rapid pace, this issue of SQ, a term that was brought on to the stage in the late 1990s, and Dinah Zohar, I guess. And the idea was, how well do you know yourself? This is a way to better say that. Mindfulness, know why you're here on the earth, where you're going, why you do what you do, so that ability to have a third objective eye on yourself, by yourself, was seen as helpful in producing leaders. And I can think back even in the mid 1990s at MIT, I attended some work with Peter Senge and the aspect of life planning, of actually, even in a business world, having an individual life plan, a purpose, and so forth, was seen as, we're experimenting to see if that was of help. Our research showed, in no uncertain terms, that the addition of SQ into leadership development curriculum allows people to have a more resilient mindset approach to life. They tend to be more grounded, stronger leaders in the face of waves of change. Now, if we went back again to the 1960s, 50s, and the changes were not as fast coming, maybe the SQ was not of such high importance, or at least less importance. But now, with these changes coming so quickly, it becomes dizzying, it becomes disorienting. And so the ability for leaders to be well grounded in who they are placates the tendency of going towards unethical behavior, mental health breakdowns, escaping the world and running from transformational change. All these things seem to be strengthened in terms of the resilience of leaders when SQ is applied. So, bottom line is, having all three, and the research done with Alberta Health Services and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, along with places that we've done other studies, cross-cultural studies in Africa, Asia, of course the US, but also Central America, all point to the ability of leaders to now understand the business of organization, understand relationships, but first and foremost, understand themselves. Well, where are we in this whole thrust then? I mean, if this is important, how are we doing as a civilization? Well, Craig and Snook, in a 2014 Harvard Business Review article, went out to test this. And they went out and asked leaders, C-suite leaders, top leaders, tell me about the mission, vision, values of your company. Well, they didn't have any trouble doing that. 2,000 in total. No trouble in, and no wallet cards, no prompters about why the company was there, the organization, the vision of the organization, the purpose of the organization, and values. But when asked about their personal SQ, why are you here and where are you going, fewer than 20% had a strong sense of their own individual purpose. Still fewer could put their purpose into a concrete statement. In other words, we have these tsunamis of change that are hitting the shore, the need for higher degree of who am I in this world, and presently we have leadership that is woefully under equipped in knowing who they are. And that's where, again, we went back and said, if we add this unit into education, if we add this unit into university-based non-degree leadership education, does it have the impact that we want it to have? In other words, leadership actually shows higher results than leaders that do not have that. That's what we went out to test. And that's what I'll be sharing within the keynote. What does this mean with innovation? That's the thrust of this conference. Well, innovation, if you think about it, innovation, creativity doesn't come from the mind. It's a spirit issue. We talk about spiritual creation. The breath of creativity comes from inspiration. Again, based in the word spirit. We don't need to run away from this. So when we think about innovation in terms of transformational jumps, not incremental, that you can get to incremental quicker or sufficiently through the tools and techniques we now have in total, in methodologies. So Lean or Six Sigma, you can get incremental change, but you're not going to get the jump or in the thinking or in the creation mode that's needed without a understanding of one's own spirit. What are you enthusiastic about? Where are you charged up? So even the area of Nike, this isn't a Nike shoe, but Nike headquarters is not too far from me in Oregon, where I live, in Portland, Oregon. I live in Bend, Oregon now. Well, I live next door to Nike. I've been to Nike many times, worked with Nike. And Nike is very interested in that SQ. They want smart people to come. They work on teams. They want people that are able to work on teams, but they want the ideas of breakthrough thinking in the areas of apparel and sports equipment and tools and obviously shoes to come from something other than just an incremental mindset. Well, I think that's all we have time for. What I would tell you is that the study itself, you can find it in a global, a widely journal. And there's other material on my website, www.stephenhacker.com. You're welcome to go to that, read the papers before the keynote. But I'll be addressing that. And also, the book I spoke to about Marvin Walsh and I, this is what we cover. It emanates from that initial research, lead self before leading others. And this is where the keynote will take a thrust. Differences. Well, the master class that will be held the day before this, we will not only go deep in the issue of expression of SQ, understanding of SQ, the expression of SQ, but I'll also tag on there another piece of research that my organizations did out of Oregon State University, where we looked at the issue of what are the key mindsets are needed, or thinking patterns that are needed from leaders. And we'll cover those 5 mindsets and how to utilize those mindsets along with a sense of who am I and where am I going within my corporate setting, within my organizational setting. So that will take up quite a bit of time and will be exciting. We will also speak more about the environment. What can you expect in the next 10 to 20 years in terms of the changing environment we're in? And I'll supply, hopefully, proof positive that this is not your father's world. This is not the way it's worked in the past. And every time that we simply extrapolate the curves from where we are now and then build our toolbox based upon a rate of change or a view of the world based upon what happened in the rearview mirror in the last 20 years, we'll find ourselves coming up short. And again, I'll provide the research data that will show that what the environment will look like 10, 20 years, really 10 years to be truthful, because 20 years is in this fast pace is a little too long. So we'll discuss leadership and the mindsets, the SQ aspect, and how that, and it'll be a workshop. We'll have a good time and we'll learn from each other. The keynote will just build upon what I shared here, and then the workshop after the keynote, I don't want to be redundant with the master's class, transformation class the day before. So in fact, what I'll introduce in the 3-hour workshop, following this keynote, will be a leadership, transformational leadership assessment tool that and I'll take whoever's in the workshop through that to have a look about in terms of different aspects of characteristics of transformational leaders. So there's been much work done in this. In fact, the transformational leadership book that's in there, and the greenish book, Tammy Roberts and I established a model that we've been using now for some time, almost a decade, I guess, and we've grounded it in some initial action research that we had accomplished, and we'll see how that plays out in members' level of equipment. So those that attend the workshop, how equipped are they transformational leadership? We'll speak some about SQ, but I'm more interested in going away from that and talk about the characteristics that are needed that complement SQ. And if we have time, which I hope we do, I'll also tie into the idea of trust building, which is a big interest of mine, an area that Dr. Marcia Willard and I have spent much time doing research. Why does SQ interact with trust? Why is building trust dependent upon self-knowledge? And that may seem evident to you, but I want to make the link so you'll understand that it's just not a nice idea, a nice package. Actually, it holds true in the face of research methodology. So that's what I plan to do. Master class the day before. Hope you join us. And then the keynote the next day and the workshop that afternoon. I'm open for questions or comments, insights. No questions, eh? Any comments? Does any of this make sense? Or did you already know all this? Oh, that's a good question. Do I see a correlation with educational 11 and SQ? Well, this is interesting. I'm not. No, I have not studied that, but I would go to Hans Rosling in Sweden, who passed away, I guess, a year ago, in his book Factfulness Now. That's out. His son and daughter-in-law helped to compose it. A brilliant investigator, put it this way, and an interesting person. Many of you probably know Hans Rosling. He showed a correlation between educational level and ignorance. Ignorance being higher about the world and the way it is, ignorance being higher by the higher educational level. And can we teach a technician? Yes, you can. We have done with National Grocers in Canada, for instance. We took on a project probably about 10 years plus ago to see that if this issue of, that's a great question, issue of leading self first, the issue of self-knowledge, the issue of exploring the sentient being of groundedness, did it make a difference with where you were in the organization or educational level? And it was thought that, well, if you're just in a grocery store and you're bagging groceries, or you're doing stocking the shelves, obviously you wouldn't be as receptive, or it wouldn't give you the boost that it would give a senior leader. Quite the opposite. We found, and this was done throughout Canada, which is a pretty big place, but the National Grocers and Loblaws, which is a half British owned firm, helped us do this, is that we went to warehouses, grocery stores, distribution points, and we found that the technician, the laborer, or whatever, was much more interested and empowered by knowing who they were and taking some fundamental tools in SQ and having breakthrough. So you can teach. I don't know if teach is the right word. You can help coach a technician become something great. I think I missed a question there. I saw Anne say okay. So is that? Good. I'm glad it gives you hope. Gives me hope too. All I'd say on this, and I'll end on this note: when we, in our minds, limit individuals, they tend to play at work, especially. They tend to live up to our low expectations. Zombies in the workplace. An article on StephenHacker.com, you'll find that zombies in the workplace. And the question is, who's producing the zombies? And my assertion is, leaders are producing zombies because of our low expectation and how we used to see the workers building pyramids. We're no longer in the pyramid building business. It causes we need spirit, we need creativity, and with that, when we challenge people throughout the organizations, they'll live up to much higher expectations of creating brilliance. Hey, I've enjoyed today. I look forward to seeing everyone in a few weeks and for you to introduce yourself. So until then, adios, arrivederci, bonsoir.
Thank you, Stephen, for your interesting webinar. We're looking forward to seeing you at our conference. Voor de deelnemers, bedankt om te kijken. En als jullie de webinar verlaten, kunnen jullie nog laten weten wat jullie ervan vonden. De volgende afspraak is de masterclass op 28 november met Stephen Hacker en het VCK-congres zelf op 29 november. Tot dan!